Okay, so this is a little introduction to engineering and IT here at Radio Verulam, just to give you an idea of what goes on behind the scenes, how things work a little bit, and kind of the challenges that we face as a engineering and IT team. My name's Lawrence. I am the current engineering team leader. I've been with the radio station for about 2 years now, so since about mid 2018. So I thought I'd start off by a little meme on what is broadcast engineering, what people think it is, and what it actually is. So it has sometimes like quite a glamorous looking image, I guess, but as a sort of expectation setter, I suppose, it's a lot of crawling under cables and dealing with IT networks and that kind of thing. So this is just to give you an idea, really, of it is very much IT based rather than maybe the image it kind of has. So this slide is to demonstrate all the kind of core areas that we have to maintain as an engineering team. I'll start in the bottom left-hand corner, and obviously you can see the studio audio equipment there. That kind of goes without saying, fairly self-explanatory. That's like the sound desks and all the kind of sound equipment involved in the studios themselves. Over to the bottom right hand side, there's obviously our transmission equipment as well. So that includes both FM and streaming, remember. So for FM, that covers the antennas and things, which you can see in the photo there at St. Peter's Tower at St. Peter's Church, and the streaming equipment, which is essentially just a PC, but also our streaming supplier as well. So we actually stream our audio to a supplier called Fair Media, and then they get it out to services like TuneIn and all the different things there. In the top right hand corner, you've got the Myriad playout system, which many of you will have come across before, especially if you're presenters. It's our main playout system of choice, and that's there's three of those. There's one in Studio A, one in Studio B, and one that is sustaining. So you can put any of those to air. And so that's our Myriad playout system. That plays out all our scheduled logs that Andy's team put together content-wise. On the left-hand side, we've got the IT backbone infrastructure. So that's our underlying IT network and security, and this is also integral for Myriad to work as well. So actually, this is kind of the centerpiece, and probably the majority of our work and effort goes into maintaining this. It's also an area that there's so many different parts to it as well, but yeah, maintaining that is important as well. And finally, on the left hand side in the middle, there's the kind of user facing IT infrastructure. So that's sort of the PCs that you interact with in the studios, and the workstations just outside the studios as well. So we obviously need to maintain those, and of course the internet connection as well. So that's critical for streaming, of course, but also for us to actually be able to access the internet while we're in the studios. You'll also notice that there's OBs there at the bottom in the middle. So we don't do so much with the OBs directly, and that's mainly Clive and his team that maintain that. And that's mainly because the remit and the amount of work created by maintaining everything else, given the size of our team, it means that taking on more stuff is quite difficult. But of course, we'll try and help out the OB team as much as we can whenever they need this. So who is in the engineering team? Well, at the moment we're quite light at the moment, and we're trying to get as much assistance as we can. But I'll go through some of those challenges later on. But I've already introduced myself. I'm the engineering team leader. My name's Lawrence. But the other two kind of main people at the moment that do a lot of the engineering work are actually Dave Neal, who does a lot of marketing and runs our websites. He actually does a lot of the engineering too, as well as Nick Hazel, our chairman. He helps out with a lot of issues as well. But we also have a couple of new members that we're just getting started with, and this video plus some other videos that I'm doing I hope will help induct them a little bit more. So I'll talk more about the kind of people that we're looking for in terms of building the team and just trying to help out as much as we can. So I just wanted to do a quick mention on how we manage tasks in the engineering and IT team. There's a huge backlog of things that we try and get through, but we actually use an online tool called Trello, which allows us to prioritize things, organize them, and assign them to people, as well as write notes and keep track of where we're at with different things. So that's just how we manage the tasks that we need to do. So how does radio work? So this is an overview of our broadcast chain, and it's going to be a simplified version, but just to give you an idea of how things work. How do we get from microphone to people's radios? So as I say, this is the current infrastructure as it is at the moment, before we've done any of the refit stuff, but this just gives you an idea of a kind of simplified view of it. There's a lot more things that go on in the background, but I'll just talk through it. Obviously, on the left hand side here we have the studios. You will have seen a lot of this equipment if you've been in any of the studios. Obviously the sound desk, CD players, microphones, and you also have two PCs in there as well. One for Myriad, which is the playout system, and the presenter PC as well, which is just a general use PC, but it's also connected to the sound desk as well. And the two studios are fairly similar. Studio B is obviously a little bit bigger, has a few more microphones and things, but in terms of setup, they're very similar. And I would say that the two kind of main central points of our infrastructure are this transmission router and the Myriad server. So what the Myriad server does is this is what holds all our music and all of our logs, which is the sort of the schedules that Andy's team deal with. And as you might expect, all the PCs involved in Myriad are connected to this Myriad server. So you've got the Studio A Myriad PC, the Studio B one, as well as the sustaining. For anyone that doesn't know, we have three because obviously we need one for each studio, but sustaining is kind of a special one. It's almost like a virtual studio, if you like, which allows us to use Studio A and B for recording and other things, but go to air with sustaining. So it's kind of like almost like a backup, if you like, but it probably is on air most of the time to kind of cover us in those times when we don't have live presenters or we need to use the studios for other things. The other interesting thing with sustaining is what allows us to use the news. So at the top of the hour when we switch to the news from IRN, that's done in quite a clever fashion in that there's what you might call like a virtual fader that you can't see. There isn't actually a physical fader for it, but when I say fader, I mean the things that you push up on the sound desk to play the sound. And basically the news comes in and sustaining opens this virtual fader, and that allows the news to play out essentially, and that's all managed by this here, which is a central control interface, and this kind of is like the brain of what goes on, and kind of takes its control from the transmission router. So there's other bits and bobs here. We obviously have an audio compressor which helps keep the levels down on our audio that before it goes out, and a distribution amplifier which allows us to take the signal that's coming out that we want to play out on air and put it to different places. So you can see here it does actually go back into the studios for the meters that you see on the desk, and also it allows you to be able to hear what's on air. So when you press the buttons to decide what you want to monitor on the speakers, if you select what's going to air, then this is what you hear. But also we have a route here going to the streaming PC. So the streaming PC is what wraps up our audio and turns it into a feed that we can send to the internet, and that allows people to play on their smart speakers and via the web. I've not mentioned this ingestion PC. This is linked to Myriad, and this is when you upload to Dropbox, so presenters can record shows, then they can upload to Dropbox, and the ingestion PC is what's responsible for putting it in the right place in Myriad, so that sends it to the Myriad server. The barracks here is generally used for OBs. It's like an IP decoder, which basically means that when we're on site on OBs, we can send the signal up to the internet, and this barracks box picks it up and decodes it and puts it back into our studio setup, and that allows us to push that to air. Then we've got here, this is how so what I've talked about so far is how we get to air via the internet, so that's the streaming PC. But as you know, we don't just have an internet stream, we also have an FM transmission as well, which is what you'd pick up on your traditional radio. So to do that, we have to send the signal somewhere that's really high for us to be able to send it out via FM and transmit it. And that place of choice is St. Peter's Church Tower. But we need a way of getting there, and so basically this is what this is. It's two kind of like mini satellite dishes, if you like. It doesn't go up to space, it's just point to point. So there's a dish at Hatfield Road and one at the tower that's pointing at each other, and that allows us to send the signal across. We then decode that signal, and it goes through these stages to get to our transmitter. So we have a silence detector that if we go silent on air, then it can switch to emergency music. So emergency music is just a PC that's playing at St. Peter's Church Tower. It's just constantly playing just a playlist of music. And if it detects that this feed here is silent, then it'll switch to the emergency PC. That we then have some audio processing, the RDS encoder. So the RDS encoder is the thing that puts the messages on your radio, where it tells you what show it is and what's if we had it switched on, it might tell you what the song is as well if we had that on there. But at the moment we have it showing the current show that's playing, and that's what this does. And then we do the actual transmission, which sends it out to the rest of Hertfordshire. Okay, so that's the simplified version. There's a lot of other things like management PCs and things that we have in the background, phone lines as well, but that gives you a good idea of what our broadcast chain looks like. Actually, I didn't mention this here. This is kind of separate to our broadcast chain. This is part of our monitoring system, and for Ofcom we have to record our output, and ideally our output from the FM transmission. That's part of our agreement with Ofcom. And so to do that, we have just essentially a radio. I've represented it here as a FM receiver, but it's basically a radio. And we have that going to a PC which just literally records whatever's coming in, and we also have a backup Raspberry Pi that does this too, just in case there's problems with this PC, as it's a critical part of our agreement with Ofcom that we have these recordings. But obviously, I mentioned before that it was a simplified diagram. There's a lot more to it. We have the whole computer network, which I know the diagram before showed a lot of computers and connections and that kind of thing, but those connections were more logical connections, if you like, rather than literal ones. The computer network has its own complexities. We have things like a hardware firewall, which is what you can see here on the right hand side, this red box. We have obviously the workstation PCs, which are outside of the studios, which people use. We also have some virtualized computers as well. So those of you that have been with the station a long time might have noticed that we had a lot more computers up on top of the studios, and a couple of those have disappeared because they've now been virtualized. So they're still doing the same job as they did before, but they're just on the main server essentially. And we also have backup equipment like our UPS, which is our backup power supply. We have the backup logging, which I mentioned before, and a router PC as well, which allows us to switch things on air without having to actually be in the studio. There's also network monitoring and lots of other monitoring things going on. What else is there? There is the phone lines, I mentioned that. And also you may have seen on top of the studios, if you've been lucky or unlucky enough to have gone up there, the crone frame. So this is what this wiring looks like. There's a whole big frame of this, and this kind of does a lot of our manual routing for the audio signals, and yeah, we're looking forward to getting rid of this because it's quite a difficult thing to keep track of. So you may be aware that we are looking to refit the studios. We have a lot of the equipment already ready to do this, and we're trying to fit this in as best we can with the time we have available and the expertise we have available. But this is to give you an idea of how the infrastructure might change for the refit itself. And what we're looking to do is change it so that there's a lot less of the traditional audio architecture, and it actually becomes more like just a computer network that has all the audio on it. The main advantages of this is that it allows us to send audio anywhere we like to any computer and have a lot more flexibility in what we do. This is a modern way of designing a studio, so that allows us to keep up with the modern trends in studios, which allows us to manage it all a lot easier as well, so we can do a lot more things remotely. And also our current infrastructure is very difficult to manage. We have some good documentation, but a lot of it's not very well documented, and so it's a big challenge to try and work out what's going on, why something is the way it is, and the refit will help in all those different areas. So the first thing you'll notice is that actually there's no transmission router now. We just have a network switch. We actually have a network switch in our current setup. I didn't represent it on the other diagram because it mainly just manages the IT network, but in this new refit it's actually a real central point because a lot of audio will be going through it as well. We still have the Myriad server, we still have the Myriad PCs, but you'll also notice that the studios look a tiny bit different. They have this thing called an engine, and actually the sound desk is no longer a sound desk, it's actually a control surface, which for all intents and purposes looks and feels like a sound desk, but in terms of the technical side of things, actually there's no audio going through it at all. So at the moment our traditional sound desks have audio signals going into it and out of it. These will have no audio going in and out, they're just on the computer network, and when you move the faders up and down, it just tells the network which audio should play and which audio shouldn't. So a lot of this is to be confirmed as well. So we're still in the design stages and just trying to plan things and make sure it all works together. But yeah, it's mainly based on a computer network. We have two networks. One that's this red one, which will be for the Myriad stuff, and the green one, which is for the audio routing. Then our route to FM will look very similar, and actually our route to the internet will look very similar. And we'll be iterating on this over time to try and improve things and try and simplify our infrastructure as much as we can. Okay, so let's look at the current challenges we have in the engineering team and what we need in terms of engineering team members. So as you could probably figure out from previous slides, there's always something to do. There's a huge backlog of tasks, and the tasks kind of mount up faster than we can deal with them, and that's purely from the time we have available to do it. Things take a long time to actually do, but also expertise as well. Things come up, and we have to do a lot of research to try and work out how to do something before we can do it. It's typically quite difficult to recruit in engineering teams, even in professional roles. So in a voluntary organisation where you're trying to recruit people on a voluntary basis, that's also very difficult. It's just another challenge to get over. So we have expertise in kind of all the areas to a degree, but we could definitely do with more, particularly in things like networking, security, and actually Myriad as well. We're getting to grips with it, but there's a lot in terms of Myriad that we don't know, and we kind of have to just get through as best we can. Another big challenge that we have with our current setup is everyone involved. There was nobody that actually was involved in putting the original setup together, and this means we don't necessarily understand all our infrastructure, which kind of sounds strange, but we sort of have to deal with things as they come. There is documentation for our current setup, but it's not all areas are well documented. It's not all clear how things go together, so we have to work things out, and that means we have to balance risks of whether we make changes or fiddle with things to try and fix them, with the potential risk of not being able to get it back on air. So that makes things a little bit fragile and difficult to manage, and hopefully our refit, as soon as we can get that done, will help that massively, because we would have designed it and set it up. And finally, I would say the other big challenge in terms of engineering is integrating new people, especially non-technical people, because the amount of like access and power that's required to access things like some of the core computers and the servers and getting into our network require a certain level, like barrier to entry in terms of knowledge. So it can be quite risky just letting anybody have a lot of access to things, and that's something that we have to kind of manage the risk and balance things with. So if you're keen on getting involved in the engineering and IT team here at Radio Verulam, then here's a few pointers on the sorts of things that we're looking for in the team. If you're already technical, then great, especially if you've worked in a technical department in a professional role before. That's a really big advantage, because then you kind of have that sort of backfill of knowledge on how to manage issues, technical issues, and that kind of thing. If you have an awareness or knowledge of IT networks and their security risks, then that's another huge bonus, and that's something that's really important that we kind of have to understand as a team quite well. In terms of technical knowledge of audio and broadcasting, of course, that's a further bonus, but not essential. That's something that's maybe a bit easier to teach than the IT and networking stuff. If you're not technical but still keen to help, then that's fine too. We're definitely keen to try and be an open team and teach people as much as we can. But obviously, as I mentioned before, there is quite a high barrier to entry. So if you're happy to self-learn some of the core topics, especially things like computer networking, how to manage IP addresses, for instance, and like network security and that kind of thing, then that's a massive help, because that's something that takes quite a long time to study and learn in a professional environment. So if you're happy to kind of do some of that yourself with our guidance. We can give you resources and that kind of thing to help you out, and certainly answer as many questions as you might have. Then that's a really big help. And of course, be confident to ask as many questions as you need and want to. We're happy to answer as many as we can. But also, if you've got a sort of cautious and logical approach to things, then that's great. If you can be careful and have that kind of way of solving problems is a really big help too. So this last slide really is just a reminder for everyone really on how to report any issues that you think engineering need to look at. The two main ways of doing this are using the engineering@radioverulam.com email, which will send an email to everybody on the team, or the web form on RV Inside. In both instances, please give as much detail as you can. This is so important for allowing us to be able to trace the issue, look for patterns, see if we've already dealt with it before, and search for those as well. If it's just in like a WhatsApp message or something, we've got no hope really of understanding what's actually going on. So as much detail as possible is so important. What is the issue? What device or PC did it happen on? Times are so important as to when things happened. What you expected to happen, and then as much other detail as you can. For on-air emergencies, of course, try and get hold of us as best you can. If we've literally fallen off air or there's a critical issue, then please get in contact with us any way you can. But please follow up with either the email or the web form on RV Inside, so we can keep track of these. One thing that people probably don't realise is if you report things on, say, Facebook, that doesn't necessarily mean that post will be shown to somebody on the engineering team. So in those kind of social media-like places, there's no kind of guarantee that anyone will see your issue. So it's really important that you use the preferred methods I stated above. And that's it. If you've got any questions, then please reach out to me directly. That's lawrence.card@radioverulam.com, or email the engineering@radioverulam.com email as shown on the screen, which will send a message to the rest of the team, including me, and one of us can help answer questions that you might have